Have you checked the children? You're a little mad sometimes.
Hi, I'm Chucky. Wanna play?
Sometimes. That is better.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
Greetings, followers of all things scarific. I am Jaime and Fuego, welcoming you once again to a special solo novel review here on the Horror Show. So, bienvenidos, all that good stuff. And this is the February of 2019 released Stranger Things Suspicious Minds. Yes, we had seen some comic book action on Dark Horse previously, but this was the first foray into like a full-length novel fleshing out additional information all about the Stranger Things universe. Cool backstory in this regard, and the fact that it's all about Terry Ives, that's right, Eleven's mother, and jumping all the way back to 1969, her first interactions with Brenner in the MK Ultra, just experimental groups in Hawkins, Indiana. So, yes, there was also two more books that came out in 2019. There was with this one, Suspicious Minds obviously taking place long before season one, there was a second book that came out, which is all about Hopper, and it's about him back in New York City as a cop, and yes, it's him telling a cool story to Eleven. That is the one that I'm in the midst of reading currently. And then there's also a third, which is more of like a YA novel called Runaway Max, and yes, that also came out last year. So, I mean, they really expanded the brand significantly, first and foremost, with this Suspicious Minds, written by Gwenda Bond, who, yes, is a notable YA author, but YA this is not, especially in both, length and scope and ideas discussed and stuff like that, whereas one of the problems with the Dark Horse comics, primarily with Stranger Things, is that they seem very watered down and very kiddie. This one does not. It basically, as I said, 1969, the world is in, especially the United States, in a sense of disarray for the fact that the Vietnam War is going on. There is, the counterculture, which has really consumed a large extent of the youth, and lo and behold, Eleven's mother is a freshman in college. She is at odds with her older sister, who is kind of her guardian of sorts, who we met in that season 2 episode, where, that Will's mom and obviously, Hopper want to basically track down Eleven's mother, get some additional information. So the season 2 is most definitely what this book ties with the most directly. So, I mean, we do meet this young Brenner who is much more sympathetic and a little bit more compassionate, but there is still that DGAF kind of mentality, which is a good portion of him. It just hasn't pretty much completely clouded his judgment and everything. And so Terry sees at her school, that there is this special kind of experimental program that, students are allowed to go and see if they would qualify for. She goes and checks it out, but in the stead of her roommate, ironically enough, her roommate was the one who got the invite, and Terry goes in her place, assumes, the roommate's identity, and in turn they eventually find out, but after they have accepted her into the program. And so once in the program, she starts going through all kinds of different experiments, nothing as like nasty rigorous, at least initially, as we see, with 11 and stuff in season 1, but still, I mean, it's like slowly upping of the ante. They're giving them psychedelic drugs initially. It's like the slow initial, like, mind melding and prodding and trying to see, what somebody's ability may be. Honestly, it was very strange reading this book the same year that Stephen King's The Institute came out, which is essentially this same sort of story, except the Stranger Things, aspect being about college students instead of younger kids, like in King's book. And so it was interesting to kind of compare and contrast the both. King's book came out many, many months later. King's book was September. This book, as I said, was February, so it just celebrated as of pretty much the day of this filming. It's celebrated its year anniversary yesterday. So once Terry, initially she thinks everything is fine, as she's making friends with some other people. They all have, different sorts of groups and, abilities and stuff like that. Just like there's some, with, pyrokinetic abilities. There's some with second sight. There's some who can see, I mean, they all have different sorts of capabilities and such. And the one thing that Terry, Eleven's mother, is unaware of as she starts this program is that she is pregnant with Jane, as she comes to start calling her once she is aware of the pregnancy, and she almost marries the boyfriend, before he heads off to Vietnam. But he heads off to Vietnam as like kind of a retaliatory measure for some stuff that he does, and so yeah, he goes off to war, and you can probably guess what happens, and it's tragic. It's horribly unfortunate, but yeah, so Eleven's mom is basically in this test program being fed all of these different like psychedelics and crazy stuff. I mean, MK Ultra, for God's sake, we're all familiar with that particular program, you know, where they were just trying to get together this like psychic warfare with everybody on the other side of the red curtain, the Russians and the entirety of the USSR. And so that's what this really it boils down to. Terry and the friends that she makes in this, and as they all start to suspect, you know, more, because they're not confined there. They go home and they come in, and they go home and they come in. They're not like being held against their will or anything like that, but they do slowly become aware that there are other children there who seemingly are being held against their will. Most notably, and this is where I also say that, you know, it ties in very directly with season 2. That's right, because this book came out in February, so that was before, you know, this past summer's season 3 of Stranger Things. So this was like tied over type stuff. We meet a very young version of 8. That's right, yeah, you know, 8 from that episode of Stranger Things that pretty much everybody hated from season 2. I didn't particularly hate it. It just seemed like a very odd diversion. Well, there was obviously a significant purpose behind this diversion, was because this novel was already intending, and I'm presuming they had planned this like way back, at least, you know, a year plus, if not more. Yeah, we were going to be introduced to her in this particular, in that particular episode, I should specify, the one where 11, you know, goes to, what, I think it was like Detroit or Chicago or something like that, I'm trying to remember, but she joins like that group of punk rock robbers and stuff like that, one of which is 8, who has escaped from Brenner many years before. And so, yes, we meet a very, very young version of her, and she forms a friendship with 11's mother, which is interesting. And you know, she's still much more, I mean, she's super young. It's 1969, you know, she's very young and you know, very naive, and still, you know, greatly looks up to with a lovingness to this much younger Brenner. And you can probably imagine where this is going to go. She's going to try to, you know, rally 8 to help her out so that she can escape, and without really divulging the full extent of everything that transpires, yeah, you have lots of nods to things, you know, that happened in both the second season and that we would later just kind of catch up with and get a little bit of resolution about in season 3. So, I mean, as far as the prequel goes, you know, Bond actually writes it very well. I got to give her credit. The language is sophisticated, it's intriguing, and it also gives us just different perspectives on these minor characters from season 2 in both 8 and, you know, Terry, you know, 11's mother, that it's just fascinating. And it's also very cool and just intriguing to see how Brenner was in this transitionary phase, you know, when the program was so significantly new. I mean, when he shows up at the facility in Hawkins at the very beginning, he is like he sees the guard and he immediately assesses the guard and the level of intelligence just based on the brief interactions with him and so on. But I really cannot compare it to the Institute enough, and it just intrigues me that, you know, and also as much as I love my Cy King, the fact that he decided to write a similar book, almost like, okay, Stranger Things, I'll show you how it's really done, which I appreciated to a degree, but dare I say, in some instances, as much as I love the whole Stranger Things universe and how they're expanding upon it with some of this stuff, and even from the little bit that I've read so far in the Hopper novel, it's really just, dare I say, I'd like to, you know, this particular book maybe on par, and in some ways, you know, a little bit more than the Institute, because of the fact that it was obviously conceived long before, or not, instead of long before, I mean completely without knowing what King's newest book was truly going to entail. And yes, this one was well written, and definitely if you want to just soak up more backstory, more information, and honestly, if you're like me and you actually didn't mind that, I think it was the 8th episode, it was either 8th or 9th episode, I can't remember. I know she was 8, but was it the 8th episode of season 2? I can't properly recall, but yeah, this was definitely a cool entry in the universe, and it's much deeper and more developed through both prose and development of character than anything that we get in the side stories and just little fill in the gap stuff that was either of those first two limited series of the Stranger Things comic book for Dark Horse. Although I will say Zombie Boys was actually a ton of fun, and that one was surprisingly worthwhile, and this was surprisingly worthwhile too. I've read a lot of these tie-in novels from different properties, whether it was like Doom and Resident Evil back in the 90s, and various others as time has gone on, Star Wars related and whatnot. And this is well developed, well written, and offers a lot of intriguing additional insight into a lot of these characters, most notably Brenner and Eleven's mom and 8. So I've been Jaime and Fuego, and on all social media sectors. Gracias to all of you who are tuning into this video. Like, share, subscribe if you haven't done it here on the Horror Show already. We've got lots of different book reviews on here, from my weekend program Hail to Stephen King to also reviews of books that Cecil and I have done for like Nosferatu, other stuff by Joe Hill, lots of comic book reviews. You can check those out every Wednesday. And if you want to become a little more supportive of this channel, we have our Patreon, which we have information about in the description below. You can tell us what to do, what to review, what to do commentaries on, or you can just tune into dozens of exclusive reviews that are, at least for the time being, only available there. So if you want exclusive content long before any of the other people here on the U-Tizzles, that's right, you can show some support for the channel, and it is greatly appreciated. So I've been Fuego, y'all have been awesome, and until next time, Fright fans, remember to stay scared.